What if one mission could change human history forever? The NASA Apollo program did exactly that. In the middle of the space race, the United States set out to do the impossible, land humans on the moon. What began as a bold dream in the 1960s became reality when Apollo 11 moon landing put the first humans on the lunar surface in 1969. When Neil Armstrong took that famous first step, history changed forever. But it was a dangerous, groundbreaking journey filled with risk, tragedy, and discoveries that pushed human exploration farther than ever before. From the tragedy of Apollo 1 fire to the near disaster of Apollo 13 mission, every mission tested human courage. Yet Apollo kept moving forward. Moving forward, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe our channel and turn on the bell icon so you never miss our next video on space, galaxies, universes, and beyond. Using the powerful Saturn V rocket, astronauts traveled farther than any humans ever had, landed on the moon 6 times, and brought back samples that changed what we knew about lunar history. Apollo was not just about beating the odds, it was about proving humanity could reach another world. And the discoveries made during those missions still shape space exploration today. The Apollo missions showed the world how fast space exploration was advancing. Before the moon landings, the program faced a heartbreaking tragedy with Apollo 1, where 3 astronauts lost their lives during a launch test. After major safety improvements, Apollo 7 became the first successful crewed Apollo flight in 1968, testing spacecraft systems in Earth orbit. Then came Apollo 8, the first mission to orbit the moon, where astronauts captured the famous Earthrise image. Missions like Apollo 9 and Apollo 10 tested the Lunar Module and prepared NASA for the first moon landing. These early Apollo missions proved that humans could travel beyond Earth and safely prepare for landing on the moon. The greatest moment in the Apollo program came with Apollo 11 in 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon. Their mission changed history and made the Apollo program a symbol of human achievement. Later missions like Apollo 12 expanded scientific research, while Apollo 13 became famous for survival after a major in-flight explosion. Though Apollo 13 never landed on the moon, it showed NASA's problem-solving skills and remains one of the most dramatic space missions ever. These missions made the Apollo program stronger and pushed lunar exploration even further. The later Apollo missions focused more on science and discovery. Apollo 14 continued lunar research, while Apollo 15 introduced a lunar roving vehicle, allowing astronauts to travel farther across the moon. Missions Apollo 16 and Apollo 17 collected large amounts of moon rocks and expanded our understanding of lunar geology. Apollo 17, the final mission in 1972, marked the end of an era, with astronauts spending over 3 days on the lunar surface. These later missions turned Apollo from a race to the moon into a powerful scientific program. In total, the Apollo missions transformed human spaceflight forever. From the first tests in Earth orbit to 6 successful moon landings, the Apollo program proved humans could explore other worlds. 12 astronauts walked on the moon, hundreds of pounds of lunar samples were brought back, and new technologies were developed that still influence space travel today. The legacy of Apollo missions continues to inspire modern programs like NASA's Artemis program, which aims to return humans to the moon and beyond. The Apollo program began in 1960 as NASA's bold next step after Project Mercury. But at first, landing on the moon wasn't the main goal. Early plans included building advanced spacecraft, orbiting the moon, and preparing humans for deep space travel. But everything changed during the intense space race. When Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space in 1961, the United States felt enormous pressure to catch up. That moment pushed President John F. Kennedy to make one of the boldest promises in history, landing a man on the moon before the decade ended. That single goal transformed the Apollo program into a mission that would change space exploration forever. To make the moon landing possible, NASA expanded at an incredible pace. New technologies had to be invented, giant rockets had to be built, and hundreds of thousands of engineers, scientists, and workers joined the effort. The powerful Saturn V rocket was developed to carry astronauts beyond Earth, while centers like Marshall Space Flight Center played a major role in designing the hardware needed for lunar missions. At its peak, the Apollo program involved over 400,000 people and became one of the greatest engineering projects ever attempted. It wasn't just about reaching the moon, it was about proving humanity could do what once seemed impossible. What made Apollo even more extraordinary was the risk. No one had ever traveled to another world before, and much of the technology had to be created from scratch. Every mission pushed boundaries, from spacecraft design to navigation in deep space. The race to the moon sparked innovation in computers, communications, and rocket science, many of which still influence technology today. More than a Cold War victory, Apollo became a symbol of human ambition, showing what can happen when science, courage, and vision come together to reach beyond Earth. As the Apollo program grew, NASA realized reaching the moon would require much more than powerful rockets. It needed new control centers, better planning, and a massive support system. That led to the creation of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where mission control would guide astronauts through every stage of flight. During this time, President John F. Kennedy gave his famous "We choose to go to the moon" speech, inspiring the nation to support the mission. Meanwhile, in Florida, NASA built what became the Kennedy Space Center, including giant launch pads and assembly buildings designed for moon missions. Apollo was no longer just an idea, it was becoming a machine built to send humans beyond Earth. Behind the scenes, thousands of engineers faced a huge question. How exactly do you land humans on the moon? Several ideas were tested, but one changed history: Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. Instead of landing a huge spacecraft on the moon, a smaller lunar module would separate, land on the surface, then return to meet the command ship in orbit. It sounded risky at first, but it made the mission possible. This bold idea helped shape the design of the legendary Saturn V and the lunar lander that would carry astronauts to the surface. Without this breakthrough, the Apollo moon landing may have never happened on time. The Apollo program was also a story of teamwork and innovation. More than 400,000 people worked on the project, from scientists and astronauts to factory workers and computer engineers. Leaders like Wernher von Braun helped develop the rockets, while others managed the giant effort behind the scenes. Every part of the mission had to work perfectly, from navigation to life support. The technology built for Apollo helped shape future space missions and even influenced everyday technologies we use today. One of Apollo's smartest decisions later helped save lives during Apollo 13 mission accident. The Lunar Module, originally built only for moon landings, became a lifeboat after an oxygen tank explosion crippled the spacecraft. It provided power, oxygen, and propulsion, allowing the crew to survive and return home. That moment proved how important Apollo's design choices were. The program was not just about reaching the moon, it was about solving impossible problems, adapting under pressure, and pushing human exploration farther than ever before. To reach the moon, the NASA needed more than brave astronauts, it needed spacecraft powerful enough to survive deep space. The Apollo missions used two main spacecraft, the Command and Service Module and the Lunar Module. The Apollo Command and Service Module was the astronauts' home in space. It carried the crew from Earth to the moon and safely back again. It handled navigation, power, communication, and re-entry through Earth's atmosphere. This spacecraft was the heart of the Apollo missions and made long-distance human space travel possible. For landing on the moon, NASA built one of the strangest and most advanced spacecraft ever created, the Apollo Lunar Module. Unlike ordinary spacecraft, it was built only for space and the moon, not for flying through Earth's atmosphere. Two astronauts used it to descend to the lunar surface, explore the moon, and then launch back up to meet the command module in orbit. This design was revolutionary. It made the Apollo moon landings lighter, safer, and more efficient. The lunar module, including the famous Apollo 11 Eagle, became one of the most iconic spacecraft in history. But none of these spacecraft could reach the moon without powerful rockets. That's where the legendary Saturn V changed history. Standing taller than a 36-story building, Saturn V remains one of the most powerful rockets ever built. It launched astronauts beyond Earth orbit and sent them toward the moon. Before Saturn V, NASA tested earlier rockets like Saturn I and Saturn IB to prepare for deep space missions. Each rocket helped build toward the giant leap of Apollo 11. Together, the Apollo spacecraft and rockets formed a system unlike anything the world had ever seen. The command module carried the crew, the lunar module landed on the moon, and Saturn V made the entire journey possible. Every part had a different job, but all had to work perfectly. These technologies helped humans land on the moon and return safely, proving what engineering and imagination could achieve. Even today, many modern moon missions, including NASA Artemis program, are inspired by the spacecraft designs first created during Apollo. While the rockets and spacecraft made Apollo possible, astronaut training was just as important. Flying to the moon was unlike anything humans had done before, so NASA trained astronauts for almost every situation imaginable. Crews spent long hours in simulators practicing launch problems, docking in space, moon landings, and emergency procedures. They even trained underwater to prepare for working in bulky spacesuits. This intense preparation helped astronauts stay calm during dangerous moments and made the Apollo missions safer. Preparing to walk on the moon also meant learning how to explore it like scientists. Apollo astronauts trained in deserts, volcanic regions, and rocky landscapes across the United States to study geology. Experts taught them how to identify important rocks, collect samples, and use scientific tools. This training turned astronauts into field explorers, not just pilots. When they reached the moon, they were ready to do real science that helped researchers learn about lunar history. One of the biggest challenges of the Apollo missions was navigating through deep space. There were no GPS satellites to guide astronauts to the moon. Instead, NASA relied on computers, tracking stations, and onboard guidance systems. The Apollo guidance computer was small by modern standards, but it was revolutionary at the time. It helped control the spacecraft and played a huge role during the Apollo 11 landing, when computer alarms appeared just minutes before touchdown. Despite the warnings, the system kept working, helping Armstrong land safely. Communication was another critical part of every mission. As astronauts traveled hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth, mission control stayed in constant contact. Giant tracking antennas around the world followed the spacecraft and relayed voice, data, and television signals. This global network made it possible for people on Earth to watch moonwalks live. For millions, seeing astronauts on the lunar surface felt like science fiction becoming real. The Apollo spacesuits were also incredible pieces of engineering. They were much more than clothing, they were personal spacecraft. Each suit provided oxygen, temperature control, and protection from dangerous radiation and moon dust. The backpack life support system allowed astronauts to walk outside and explore while staying alive in the harsh lunar environment. These spacesuits were built for survival and mobility, and they helped make every moonwalk possible. Moon exploration brought surprising discoveries. Astronauts found mountains, valleys, deep craters, and signs of ancient volcanic activity. They placed scientific instruments on the surface to study moonquakes, solar wind, and the moon's interior. Some experiments continued sending data back to Earth for years. These discoveries helped scientists better understand not only the moon, but also the early history of the solar system. One major Apollo achievement was proving humans could live and work in deep space for long periods. Later missions became longer and more complex, showing astronauts could conduct science, drive lunar rovers, and operate equipment far from Earth. This experience shaped future space missions, including space stations and long-duration flights. Many lessons from Apollo are still used today as NASA plans missions to Mars. The lunar roving vehicle, first used on Apollo 15, changed moon exploration in a huge way. Before the rover, astronauts could only walk short distances from the Lunar Module. With the rover, they could explore much farther and carry more equipment. It looked simple, but it was designed to work in extreme temperatures and low gravity. The rover allowed astronauts to discover more about the moon than ever before. Apollo also changed technology back on Earth. The race to reach the moon pushed advances in computers, electronics, materials, and telecommunications. Engineers developed smaller computers, improved batteries, and stronger materials. Some technologies created or improved during Apollo later influenced medical tools, electronics, and everyday products. In many ways, the moon race helped speed up modern innovation. The Apollo missions also inspired millions of people around the world. Young students watched launches and dreamed of becoming astronauts, scientists, and engineers. The program helped spark interest in science and technology for an entire generation. Even today, many people working in space exploration say Apollo inspired them to follow that path. Another important part of Apollo was how it changed our view of Earth. Photos taken during the missions, especially the famous Earthrise image from Apollo 8, showed our planet as a small blue world floating in darkness. These images changed how many people thought about Earth, nature, and humanity's place in the universe. Some historians say Apollo even helped inspire environmental awareness. Although Apollo ended in 1972, its influence never disappeared. Scientists still study the moon rocks brought back during the missions. Engineers still learn from Apollo spacecraft designs. And every time a new lunar mission launches, the Apollo legacy is part of that story. It remains the foundation for modern moon exploration. Today, NASA's Artemis program is building on what Apollo started. But this time, the goal is not just to visit the moon, but to stay longer, build new systems, and prepare for missions to Mars. In many ways, Apollo was the first chapter of a much larger journey into deep space. The lessons learned during those missions are helping shape humanity's future beyond Earth. Perhaps what makes Apollo so remarkable is that it happened with technology far simpler than what exists today. Computers were weaker than modern phones, yet astronauts reached another world. That achievement continues to amaze people because it shows what vision and determination can accomplish. Apollo was not only a victory for NASA or the United States, it was a milestone for all humanity. Even decades later, the question remains, how did humans reach the moon in such a short time? The answer lies in courage, science, and teamwork. Apollo brought together dreamers and problem solvers to do what once seemed impossible. It turned science fiction into reality. The story of Apollo is more than moon landings. It is a story of exploration, innovation, and pushing beyond limits. From the first tests to the final footprints on lunar soil, the Apollo missions showed what humans can achieve when they dare to go farther. And as new missions prepare to return to the moon, the spirit of Apollo still points the way forward. Stay connected with Planets in Perspective so you never miss any latest update on everything you want to know about space and its beyond.